Okay, well this is, maybe it'll start working out. Anyway, so who am I? So, my name is Toby Sears. You already said that. I am an ultrasound industry expert. This is all I have ever done for my entire career. So it's more than 25 years, we'll just leave it at that. And spent some time with an OEM called Accuson back in the 90s and up into the early 2000s. We were bought by Siemens, spent about a year with Siemens, and decided that I was going to go and try this independent service world, kind of at the beginning of the independent service world. And so moved on to that, and I've been independent ever since with a couple of different companies. I currently work with Trisonics, and we just help a lot of people, save everybody a lot of money at the same time. And we are solely focused on ultrasound at the moment. Always a chance that I'll change. I speak at lots of conferences, both for engineers and for sonographers. We kind of do both sides of the ultrasound spectrum, talking with a lot of care topics and various topics. We also do lots of training. I've written, I can't even count the number of courses I've written. Them with these system courses for engineers, and probably trained a few hundred engineers. Interestingly enough, I've trained engineers that work for Philips, for Philips, and I've trained engineers that work for Siemens. So while those companies say they don't like us, they will utilize us to get the knowledge they need. So what are we going to learn or discuss today? So we're going to see how care of a transducer translates to savings. It's a pretty easy mathematical equation, really, but we're going to look at that. And then we're going to understand why it's really important. Why does it matter that care is an important topic? Let's take a look at that. We're going to understand the sonographer a little bit, maybe more than you do today, and their mindset, kind of how they approach the equipment, and how it might be different from what you think it is. And I have some great insight into that. Then we're going to look at the common transducer failures, the ability to spot trends in departments, and understanding what can be prevented. Because that's the biggest thing, is transducers are going to get damaged, but let's bring that down to the lowest possible amount of damage. So, transducer care does equal cost savings, but we need to really come to grips with the whole idea that this is a process. This is not a one-time thing. You're going to work on transducer care for the next month, 6 months, year, 2 years, and when you think you got it, you leave it alone and you're back at it 6 months later. It is an ongoing, never-ending process. And that's how we approach it with our customers, is let's just always be focused on care. And as soon as you think you fixed everything that a transducer can be damaged on, somebody will find something new. We will talk about even what are some of those new trends today that we're seeing that we didn't see 3 and 4 years ago. So it's up to you, me, and anybody that kind of works with sonographers, works with ultrasound departments, to teach and instill these ideas. Sonographers are taught that transducers are valuable, they're taught that they're useful, they're not necessarily taught that they're fragile. So that's something that may be foreign to us as engineers, is that we may think that they're fragile. They may not. And especially if they've been in the industry all the time, because 20 years ago, transducers were fragile, but they were actually stronger than they are today. Transducers today, way more things that can break, much more fragile. So it's kind of almost a reverse thought process from what most sonographers do. And then we need to think about what if it's beyond just the sonographer, or maybe just beyond the ultrasound department. A lot of damage occurs in central stereo or 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 in between, and we're going to talk about those kinds of things as well. So when we get into talking about damage and abuse, and it does occur, probably doesn't occur as much as we think it occurs, but when we get into talking about that, there's kind of 2 ways that can happen. That can be a very confrontational discussion, where there's a lot of blame going on, or it can be a partnership discussion where you're just trying to find the end cause. And our point of view, my point of view particularly, is you can do and have this discussion without ruining a relationship with that sonographer or that doctor or that central sterile department. And the less damage you do, the better your chances are that you're going to be successful in teaching the care methodology. And then with consistent messages of transducer care, cost savings will definitely occur. We have a TEE talk that we give, and we're not going to do that today because it takes like an hour just by itself, just on TEE. And we tend to give it at facilities when we get 6 or 8 TEEs repaired in the first 3 or 4 months, and that's a pretty good number. It's a big dollar amount. And we'll offer it all the time. It's free. We go in, we do it. And then folks are kind of like, okay, let's get you in. We want to meet with everyone. We want to meet with the sonographers, doctors, central staff, whoever can touch this probe. We want them all in the same room. We want them hearing the same message all at the same time. Super casual, though. We're not blaming anybody. We're just informing them. When we do this talk, we see damage drop off to almost 0 for a year. Documented it. I've done it at 3 or 4 hospitals, and it's happened every single time. We've had other guys take the talk and do it at their hospitals. Same thing. It's just we bring that enlightenment to them, and bells start to go off. I was doing the talk one time, and a gentleman from Central Stereo finally looked at me and said, "Could you just tell me what they do with this?" No one had ever told them what the transducer or TEE was used for. So when I told him, his eyes got about the size of my glasses. It was, you just couldn't believe it. So it was very obvious he was very bothered by the things he had done to that transducer. So just a little bit of knowledge went a long way. So why does care matter? So it does save time in the long run. It may sound like talking and doing all this communication and really working with people takes a lot of time. It does. But the goal is that the more you do this, the less time it will take in the long run. And dealing with transducers getting sent in all the time, and dealing with, getting loaners and making sure they're okay, and making sure you don't damage a loaner or whatever, that takes a lot of time as well. So we do save time by having these discussions. Not only that, the discussions we're going to talk about today will go far beyond just transducer care. It will translate to just better communication with the department and more effective service overall. So obviously, if you're taking care of things, you're going to save your hospital, your department money. Today, no matter what we say about healthcare, we're all interested in saving money. So it is a factor, and it's probably one of the biggest factors. The better your transducer gets, the longer it will last. I get asked this all the time. How long should my individual transducer last? And there is no time frame on that. I've seen individual transducers last for 5, 6 years that were really cared for. I've seen them last for 30 days that were not really cared for. And the same goes with TEE transducers. Some TEEs have been out there for a few years. Others, departments can't make 3 weeks. So it just depends. And some of it is a little bit luck of the draw. Sometimes accidents happen. But you can tell when there's a mantra of care across the department. So, and then most important, and we tend to forget about this last step a lot, but we always try to tie it back, is that the better these transducers are, the better they're cared for, the better the outcome and the safer it is for the patient. So, that's the key. And especially when we start talking about intercavitary transducers. In ultrasound, we don't have a lot of worry about infection and contamination. But when we get into transesophageal, into vaginal, into rectal, we have to worry about those things. So that's something we need to focus on. So the sonographer relationship, I would say, in my experience of the last 25 plus years, and certainly more so in the last 15 years, as we've worked closer with hospital engineers, is that we see a little bit of a breakdown between the hospital engineer and the sonographer in understanding kind of, not necessarily the roles, but how each of those people interact with the ultrasound machine. And ultrasound is really different than imaging. And we're going to talk about why it's different and how it's different and the sonographer's role here in the next few minutes. But there seems to be a bit of a divide. And I've seen that working with biomeds and engineers for really since I got into the independent world. So for 15, 16 years, I've seen that. And so today we're going to get hopefully a little bit of insight that will help. and help everybody understand kind of where they're coming from with the machine and how you can help them understand how to take care of their equipment a little better. And this is something that I'm actually approaching from the sonographer side as well. When we're going to their conferences now, we're talking about system and transducer care from their perspective and things that they should be doing. And that's actually a very desirable talk. I'm actually going next Saturday and delivering that to a sonographer conference. I get asked to go about 4 or 5 times a year to different conferences and deliver a talk similar to that. And it's reaping benefits, we think, for them. So how do you move forward with improving the sonographer relationship? Because if we don't have this sonographer relationship, right, and we try to talk to them about care, the impact of the message is going to be diminished a lot. I'm not going to say it's not going to have any effect, but it's not going to have a great effect. It's like, you know, walking out and telling somebody that you don't like, hey, I know a better way to ride a bicycle than you. And that might be true, but if you all don't like each other, they're not going to really care if you know how to ride a bicycle better, right? So if you have a relationship, then you tell them how to change something that's going to help them, and they understand why it's going to help them, odds are it's going to have a much greater impact. And I get asked all the time, you know, why is it when you come in to work on our machine, the sonographers will tell you things that they won't tell me as a hospital engineer? I get asked this by hospital guys that I work with. These are guys that I've worked with for 10 years. I'm friends with them. I know them well. And I tell them the same thing that I'm going to tell you today. I kind of have street cred with them. Ultrasound to me, I don't just know a machine, I understand the modality. I work in ultrasound, that's what I do. And so I naturally have street cred, so they're going to, it's kind of like the whole nurse-doctor relationship. The patient goes in and sees a nurse, and they will tell the nurse a couple of things, and the doctor comes in and they tell them the 500 things that they have wrong. It's the same idea. What we're trying to do is encourage the hospital engineer to develop this relationship so they get told 500 things. So everything goes to them, and it makes more sense. So it helps build that. So we need to talk about who or what a sonographer is or does, because it may be different in reality than what you think it is. Then we need to start talking about building a relationship with trust, because in the end, that's what it's about, right? They need to trust that you're going to do everything right to take care of their equipment when it breaks. You need to trust that they're taking care of their equipment before it breaks. Working together is how we get there. We build this relationship of trust. So, kind of starts by listening to what they have to say and how it impacts them. That's probably the biggest area where we see the falling apart between the sonographer and the hospital engineer, is not really listening to what they say or the concern they have, and making an assumption that you have figured it out before they finish talking. Certainly don't undermine their concerns, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then this last one, which may not be for everybody. It kind of depends on how engaged in ultrasound you're going to be. And we're going to talk about that a little bit as we move on today. But learning some ultrasound basics. Now, if you're going to be the ultrasound guy in your facility, if you're going to be the main person, and you're going to take care of all the ultrasound, we would say, yes, you really need to learn some ultrasound basics, basic theory, concepts, how the machine's used. In our basic ultrasound class that we teach, whether we take that on the road or teach it in our Harrisburg office, we actually teach you how to scan yourself a little bit. We spend about 2 hours just working with the machine and scanning and getting a feel for what that's like and how, honestly, how difficult it can be. But trying to learn the look of that image a little bit and how it might be different from X-ray or CT or MRI if you work on everything. And ultrasound is different. I mean, that's kind of been the one catch with this imaging modality over the years, is that it's a really different looking modality, and nobody's ever quite sure what to do with ultrasound. Even radiologists will often tell us that. Well, I don't get ultrasound all the time, and I'd rather just do an MRI or a CT. But The way things go today, and because ultrasound is cheap and doesn't hurt anybody, there's lots of ultrasounds that are done first now. So let's start off and kind of just break everything down back to the beginning and define what a sonographer is. Because it's probably different than what you think. So, by definition, a diagnostic medical sonographer is the full title, right? By the way, the only imaging technician who has the word diagnostic in their title. We'll talk about that in a minute. That's actually a really important distinction. So, healthcare professional specializes in the use of ultrasound imaging devices to produce diagnostic images, scans, videos of 3D volumes of anatomy, and diagnostic data. So that's a whole lot of words that do what we think it does. It just means they do ultrasounds for a living. A few notes about sonographers that you may not know, and kind of how they go about their scanning, their job, what they're required to do. A lot of us as engineers would think they're required to operate an ultrasound machine. That's what they do, right? They use the ultrasound machine. That's actually the least part of their job. That may sound crazy, but using the machine is a tool. That's all it is for them. The use of the machine is the lowest percentage of what they do. The biggest percentage of what they do is the visualization of what's happening. And we're going to talk about this sonographer machine patient relationship in just a couple of minutes and how that is completely unique in the ultrasound world compared to other imaging modalities. So, you may not know, sonographers are almost always, and this does vary by hospital, but everyone I've ever talked to tells me this, so I'm putting almost always in there just in case there's a few hospitals that don't do it this way. Call on to interpret their scans. So that means when they do an ultrasound, when they're done and they write the report, they are interpreting the report for the physician. This interpretation will almost always also include a diagnosis. So that's, and I would say the vast majority of the time, those diagnoses are signed off on by the doctor. I mean, not always, let's say 70, 75%, but it is a big number. And I feel like I'm pretty right on that. My wife is a sonographer. We go way back. So I have some insight information into that. I've also, when I was kind of writing this out, I spoke to a number of professors that teach ultrasound and other sonographers out there just to kind of make sure I was, as right as I thought about this. And so this is what they do, and when they're scanning the patient, it's all about the patient. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Also, sonographers, and I don't know if other imaging modalities can do this as well, but if a sonographer is doing a scan and they find something other than what was ordered, a sonographer can, and in fact is probably required, to alter their scan. They don't have to get a doctor's permission to now go and scan something else. They immediately do that. So that decision is made on the fly, and they move into that section. So if they're, if they get a order to do somebody's kidney, which is right next to your liver, and they see something in the liver, they will interrogate that without a doctor's order. So, the term ultrasound tech is an interesting, it's something that we use a lot. And it's a fine term, right? Even a lot of sonographers will refer to themselves as an ultrasound tech because the word sonographer isn't as widely known. But I can tell you, if you're going to be working in ultrasound all the time, no ultrasound tech will dislike being called a sonographer. Man or woman, it doesn't matter. Sonographer is gender neutral, so to speak. And if you use that term to them, you will gain street cred. Nobody dislikes it. They prefer that title. They're not going to be upset by being called an ultrasound tech, but it is considered substandard to being called a sonographer. A sonographer is their actual title. It's not actually in the dictionary yet, but you know, they keep using it enough, it will happen. And by the way, just to give you an idea how tight the community of sonographers are, there is a Facebook group called Sonographers Do It in the Dark, because they always scan in dark room, right? The membership in that Facebook group is somewhere around 80,000 members. And the activity of that group is crazy high. They probably get 5,000 to 10,000 interactions per day in that group. So it is huge. And it can be a really good group for finding out some information too. You can search in that group and that kind of thing. Vendors aren't allowed to comment about products, or you're not allowed to sell anything, but often sonographers will relay their reviews of equipment and other things in there. So we'll even go in and look at that sometimes. You know, well, how's this piece of equipment performing? Because they'll just get on there and complain about it or boast about it. So it's a pretty interesting thing. So it is a tight-knit group. And they talk about topics like this. Oh, there it is. Oh, now it's good. Well, that's great. Okay, so let's talk about the sonographer system-patient relationship. So this is unique. And I think this understanding this relationship helps everybody understand how a sonographer functions and what they do on a day-to-day basis. And by understanding that, you'll understand what they do and be able to learn how to communicate with them better and become kind of more of a team. So if we look at other imaging modalities, MRI, CT, X-ray, nuke med, the idea is we get a patient, we take them, we put them on a table or place them for the imaging, right? And what does that technician then do? They walk away from them. They leave that patient. They isolate them, and they go and they ask the machine to take the picture. If it's an X-ray, it's around the corner, hit a button, the machine takes the picture. CT, MRI, into a control room, nuke med, over to usually a desk or something to start the system and have them scan. Ultrasound is totally different. When a sonographer is going to do an ultrasound, it's machine, sonographer, patient, with the sonographer being the conduit of the image. It's the only time where the technician, the sonographer in this case, is actually touching the patient and the machine at the same time. Doesn't happen anywhere else. And so the thought for engineers like me, and I believe this for a long time, is that the sonographer cared about the machine. They don't. All of their care is on the patient. And they don't look at the keyboard. Sonographers do not look at the keyboard when they're scanning. They may look at the keyboard when they type in a patient name or pull work list or do that kind of thing. They don't look at the keyboard. They only look at the monitor. They don't. They do look at the patient at times, especially if the patient asks questions or whatever, because again, it would be, that's natural for them. Their care is about the patient. So it's all about, you know, touching the patient, watching the monitor, and feeling everything else. So we see this a lot when there's debate about, oh, this button doesn't work well on the user interface. I literally saw this about Belleville once. An engineer that I worked with for years, the sonographer said, you know, I think my freeze button is getting a little iffy. It's not working very well. Right in front of her, he went over and pushed right in the middle of the button and did it like 2 or 3 times, and it worked. And he looked at her and said, no, sorry, you're just having a bad day. And when she left the room, I'm like, hey, you know what? She doesn't push the middle, she pushes the edge. Try the edge. You push the edge, and it didn't work. I said, but you just really made her mad. I said, because you didn't believe her, and because you didn't want to go through the hard work to find out what the details were. And I had known that discussion, really honest. And it changed his perspective. And this was probably the first time that I had seen this in action personally myself and realized that the divide was there. Is that there was, just this whole concept that there was a divide. So that patient relationship to the machine drives everything about that. It's also what causes a sonographer to be really particular about their machine. They get a little edgy when things aren't right. A light blinking on a keyboard to a sonographer because they're in a dark room, if it's not supposed to be blinking, can be devastating. Just that one thing. Partially because in ultrasound, we're looking for the difference on a patient that might be one shade of gray out of like 256 shades of gray. That's what they're called to find. So that can be very difficult. And so if there's a light blinking and it's distracting them, and they don't see that, that patient's problem doesn't get found. That's the reality. So that's how tough this can be at times. So, how do we build the trust relationship? Like almost every relationship, it's just really all about communication and just paying attention to it a little bit and really having to vary a little bit. It doesn't take a lot. Showing genuine interest in ultrasound. So that's the fastest way. Whenever we teach basic ultrasound, what I leave everybody with is, when you go back to your facility, take a half hour per week for the next month. Go find somebody in ultrasound that will teach you something. By the way, sonographers, I don't know what it is by their very nature. I've never met one that doesn't like to teach what they do. Maybe all imaging techs are that way, I don't know. But sonographers, they have no problem with it. They want to teach what they do. So weird. Find a sonographer that's willing to spend 15, 20 minutes with you twice a week, looking at ultrasound images, maybe scanning yourself. Those of us that have been doing this forever, I have like 5 places on my body I scan. I don't even know if they're really like clinical good scans, but I know what I look like. I can walk up to almost any machine now. 29 years does that. Not everybody's going to do that in the first week. But I can scan myself in my Phillips unit, and I can tell you in 2 seconds if that unit is really fine or not. That's all it takes. I can scan my heart, my carotid, my thyroid, and my kidney liver. I'm not even sure if I have a kidney liver here. I'm pretty sure it's there, but I don't know. I don't know how to make it. So I'm not a sonographer, I'm not clinical, but I've learned those things. And it saves me all the time. And if I need help, I ask. And I build those relationships. And that's kind of the street cred that we talk about these days, is having that ability to talk about that. I don't know pathology. Sonographers will talk to me about pathology sometimes, and I'll be like, hey, remember, been doing it a long time, but I don't know pathology. And they appreciate that. I'm just honest with them. So, learning some basic ultrasound concepts and terminology, it goes just a really long way. Being able to talk in their verbiage, which is totally different from X-ray or MRI or CT. Ultrasound has its completely own subset of communication. This is an interesting one. We hear this a fair bit. Sonographers are not necessarily technologically advanced folks. We think they are naturally because they use a very advanced piece of equipment. So my wife's a perfect example. She's a phenomenal sonographer. She's done high-risk OB. She does OB now. She is really talented. She stopped scanning for 19 years. The day she went back, it looked like nobody could even believe she had been scanning for 19 years. She just has the gift. And mostly because it's about spatial relationships. And that's what she can do really well. But my wife is not technically good at all. I mean, up until 2 years ago, she probably didn't know how to use Google Maps. I mean, it was just, she's just not great. So she knows what it is, but she can't help you figure out how to fix it. So she can tell you what's wrong, but she can't tell you how to fix it. And as engineers, we can be frustrated by that. Like, that's something that we would think, you can use this machine. Don't you understand that you should clean the filter? No, not unless somebody told them to clean filter. It's just not natural. And we don't want to take what we think is natural and put on them. We need to understand where they're at and kind of meet them there, right? And then teach them. At the same rate, maybe they're teaching you ultrasound, you start teaching them the basic care concepts. And that's where the trust happens. That's where everything goes together. We start working that way. So, tell our engineers, don't try to talk to them in technical terms if you don't think they're going to understand it. And probably most of them aren't. You know, we don't want to talk down to them, but at the same point, we want to be sure that we're talking in a way that they're going to understand it. And maybe that comes down to showing, you know, just spending some time with them. So remember, they are first care providers. And there are some times when they will just default to that, and they'll be, you know what, I just can't use this anymore because I can't take care of my patient. And to us, that might be, well, they're just, you know, being a little superior about it, and they need to get over it. But, you know, that's the reality. If the machine gets to a point, or the transducer gets to a point where they can't take care of the patient, the default is going to be to draw hard on. That's where they're going to default. Us as engineers, we don't necessarily like that part of it, because we always think there's a way to make it all work. Sometimes there's not. And the ultrasound system is a tool. We think of it as the device that they, you know, need, and it is. We think of it as something bigger. To them, it's the tool to care. But their job is to get an answer for the patient. That's the job. A few things that I've been told by sonographers when you all leave the room. So it's kind of one of those things, just like the doctor-nurse relationship. I'm the guy that's been there for the last 29 years, and when the hospital engineers I work with leave the room, the sonographers turn around and say, you know, these things to me. They're like, why do they take my machine to their biomed shop for like a day or two? What are they doing to it? And so my advice is, as much as you can, work on their machine in their department. Sometimes it's not practical in some hospitals. It just doesn't make sense. And sometimes the jobs, you know, maybe it's easier if you go to, but if it's every time for everything, taking the machine back, they notice. And believe it or not, since the machine is their tool that they use, they become personal. I have one department where it's a vascular department, and a lot of times sonographers use whatever machine is next. You know, they just go to whatever. In this particular department, there's 4 sonographers, they all have their own machine. Nobody swaps machines. So it becomes really personal. So I have one lady, I walk in there and I mean, we're good friends. And she'll just look at me and she's like, don't touch it unless you tell me. And she is, I mean, she is not kidding. She's a Southern Kentucky girl, and she would let me have it. And so I don't touch her machine until I go and say, hey, are you ready for me to go look? And then I don't open it until I talk to her. Nothing. Every step she gets communicated with, because I know that it is that important to her. So I've learned that. So it's just an interesting thing. And again, these are things that I've observed. Literally, I've had a dozen sonographers tell me this in the last 5 years. I don't understand where my machine goes, why it's gone for a day, or if it's down, or they always take it. You guys work on here. So just an interesting concept. If you don't know the answer, be honest with your sonographer. We just experienced this about a week and a half ago. An engineer has very little ultrasound experience. There was an image quality problem, which are the hardest things to deal with, and he tried to fake it and just failed miserably. It was so bad, it was embarrassing for everybody in the room, including the sonographer, including us. I mean, it was just one of those things where it just, we're, you know, after all, and we're like, you know, just be honest. Just tell them you don't know, and then you'll get them an answer. They're good with that. Much better than, you know, we always say the fake it till you make it thing. I wouldn't try that so often with sonographers. once we, have started the building of trust, how do we move that forward? How do we increase that to a point where it can be impactful? Because that's where we want to get to, right? So the biggest thing is, if the sonographer knows clear objectives of what you're going to do in ultrasound, you're going to be the ultrasound guy. And I have a hospital system I work with in Kentucky. We have not ever done 1 minute of service there, nor will we ever, because the guy there is that good. He gets parts from us, but they actually have not paid for outside labor in ultrasound for 12 years. Not 1 hour. So we know we're not going in there, we're never going in there. He's the guy, and he's strong, but he knows ultrasound. He can scan himself, he's everything an OEM guy or a guy like us would be. That's awesome. So he knows what he can do. So he sets those objectives. He tells everybody there, they know. We need something we call Aaron. Aaron's going to fix it for us. We're good. Maybe that's who you are. Maybe it's not who you are. Maybe the sonographers need to know that, hey, I'm going to take care of your PMs. We're going to take care of the little things. As soon as it gets beyond us, we're going to call on somebody. If that's the objective, when it happens, it should happen. Sometimes we'll see this with people when they get to that roadblock and they hesitate before they move to calling in somebody instead of just moving to it right away. And then you break down that trust. So that's what we would say is the objectives are there, drive to the objective and then move beyond it. This next one I get told too, don't complain to a sonographer about how busy you are. They're busy too. They understand that you're busy, but they don't, they just need the machine fixed. So your goal is to work with each other, but in this particular case, you're the service provider. So they're going to look to you to move towards them, more so than them moving towards you. So it's just kind of a natural consequence of things. So we would say that, the direction is always going to be you moving to them to try and give them an answer and work with them. So once we have trust, then we move to communication, right? It's all a pathway. And helpful communication is where we want to get to because that's what we're really going to teach about transducer care and those kinds of things. So, the biggest things I can tell you is sonographers will respond to education much more readily than blame. There's a time for honest, not blame, but accountability. There is a time for that. I would say it's probably, it's not something that, the first conversation we're going to go to is when your transducer's bad, and I think you broke it. Probably not the place to start. But that can happen. We need to find out what root causes are. We need to figure out how to get there. And education is the way we get there. The care is observed, work with the sonographer, find a way to resolve it. An overreaction to that will create a disruption in that trust. They'll be like, look, I made a mistake and you blew your top. What was the first thing that happened? So any trust that you built up, it starts to dissolve. Again, it doesn't say we won't hold people accountable, but it does say that we need to be very careful about how we get it. So continuing that, if we have bad news or we need to correct behavior, don't just speak to them, talk with them. Create a conversation around it. How do we do this? How are we going to move transducer from point A to point B without damaging it? Those kinds of things. So, we've talked about this already. It seems like all of this is really time consuming. And there is a time factor for engineers in doing this, for sure. But in the long run, it will pay dividends, I promise you. It has for myself, it has for other people at Trusonics. This is a natural part of our business. So now we're going to talk about transducer care. So we've talked about the communication piece. So now how do we look at the transducers and figure out care and go from there, right? So in order to do that, you need to recognize the things that are happening to transducers. So not only the damage that occurs, inspect probes, those kinds of things. So we're going to go through some basic rules, some transducer care fails. All of these are pictures of transducers generally at a customer site. Some come from our probe lab. We'll talk about transducer inspection, and then, included in all of this is figuring out why something failed or how it was damaged, and therefore how do we correct that. So rules that apply to transducer when it comes to handling and care and general taking care of transducers. One, keep transducers clean when not being used. It's just a normal thing. We don't want gel left on transducers, that kind of thing. Secure transducers when not being used. Quite often they're left on the machine. That is generally considered to be secured. Maybe being left on a bed is not secure. Being left on a countertop might not be secured. We don't want unintended consequences. So many of the problems that happen with transducers are truly just that. It's the unintended consequences. Don't drop transducers. We like to call this in technical terms vertical deceleration trauma. But a dropping of a transducer used to be, we would say, if you drop a transducer from a foot or two, it'll probably survive the damage 15 years ago. But the way transducers are today, if you drop a transducer at 6 inches, it probably will not survive the damage. And some transducers, that's down to about 2 inches now. So they are just far more fragile today than they ever have been. That's because they do so much more. And they're so much lighter. It used to be the plastics were super strong. I mean, probes weighed a pound, but sonographers, the carpal tunnel and the rotator cuffs and the repetitive motion industry in the sonographer industry is huge. It's random. So everything's lighter. Lighter means more breakable. Don't allow a transducer nose to bump into anything hard. Really important when you go from room to room. Really important if you're putting the transducer in a drawer. I think storing transducers in drawers is an okay thing. That drawer must be lined in foam. And I just had a site, known these guys forever. And had a EV probe that the whole front of the array was, just damaged completely. So what are you doing? He goes, they store them in drawers, and we realized there was one drawer that didn't get one. So they are, by the time they called me, they had already dissected the problem. Because I don't know how they missed it, but the back of the drawer had no foam on it. And sure enough, they stuck it in there, bagged it.
I have a question about the blind drawers. What material do you use? Because infection control rolls around and says, no foam.
Yeah, so I actually don't know what people use. They just line them with towels and foam, and so you might, and if that's the case, and you can't line the drawer, then don't put it in a drawer.
You gotta use the polyurethane plastic foams that they use in physical therapy. So those cements that they roll out with their plastic. They're going to be
Perfect. Nice. Moving on to keep cables straight and not wound up, we're going to see about cables and how important that is. It's probably the most overlooked part of the transducer by most people. Always use approved cleaning disinfection methods. And you don't store transducers in disinfecting methods. Whether it's Sidex or even Trophon. We don't want the probes left in the Trophon longer than they're supposed to be there. I usually get the phone call Monday morning. So how long is too long to leave the probe soaking in Sidex? And my answer is usually so it's been there since Friday, right? And they're like, yeah. And that doesn't necessarily kill the probe, but we do believe it takes life out of the probe. So instead of that probe lasting 5 years, from that event, maybe it only lasts 4.5 or 4 years. You do that a few times, and it will keep reducing the length of the life of that probe. Transesophageal transducers. We haven't specifically talked about that yet. We're going to talk a little bit about those specifically today, but the number one thing with TEE is they always get transported in a hard-sided plastic container. Used to be, 20 years ago, we stuffed them in pillowcases and carried them around the hospital. I'm not sure who came up with that idea, but that was stupid. So there's nothing protectable in a pillowcase. You're going to see some examples of what doors do to these probes, and it's not pretty. So here's a couple examples of twisted cables on transducers. So we've got this one, not so bad. There's a little bit of twisting going on there. This one is horrific. I took this picture. I wouldn't even try to, I wouldn't straighten it. I couldn't. I felt like if I straightened it, the probe's going to stop working. And from the time I took that picture, the probe lasted about another 18 months and then died. And I don't know whether it was the cable or not. And then you can see here, even really a small amount of twisting is actually broken the sheathing. So, which isn't detrimental to the probe, still has to be fixed. But that's a fixable thing. We can fix that sheathing, relatively low cost, and keep moving forward. Something like this though, that was not straightable. This probe died for another reason. I actually took that home over a weekend and tried to straighten that to see if I could. So I probably unwound it like 15 times over a weekend, and I made it an insignificant amount better. So even at this point, it was twisted really bad. Obviously, we don't want cables to be wrapped around wheels or around beds or anything else. So it's the kind of thing you just need to always be conscious of. And we talk to sonographers about this all the time. Just constant reminders. Hey, remember, let's keep those cords up off the floor. Matter of fact, we go in and do PMs, and if the transducer cables are super black, right where it hits the floor, it means that they're on the floor all the time. If they're on the floor all the time, they're going to get rolled over. So it's one of those things that just points out to us that, hey, we need to get the cords hung on the machines. All machines have hooks these days. One of the reasons we are concerned about cables, and this is an area that we have learned that sonographers don't understand this, a lot of hospital engineers haven't really thought about it, is the cables. So for every cable that there is, this is a pretty typical wire bundle. Two different brands here. Color cable doesn't mean anything necessarily. Probably doesn't in manufacturing, but it doesn't mean anything. And so you can see there's, 100 to 150 lines there, right? So generally in the ultrasound world, these are coaxial. So every one of those lines has two solder points. And what does that mean if it's coaxial? If we go back and remember our wire theory, the signal does not travel on the wire, it travels in the wire, right? It travels between the two, between the inner and outer layer. So if that wire gets bent, it diminishes the signal. So it's not about having a continuous wire, it's about having a continuous path. And that's why twisting makes the probe go bad. So it all matters. There are some probes today that are not doing that. They're actually transmitting on the wire. They're not really seeing great benefit. They're still failing to go off the same rate. If you're not using, sites aren't using trophons yet, and they're still using Cydex, one thing we don't want to ever happen is we never want those probes to rest on the nose. This is a picture of a place that they didn't have a funnel to hold the probe in place. So we always want that. Two bad things about that. A, you put it in there, you drop it the last inch, you keep doing that over and over and over, eventually you're going to damage the array. B, when it's resting on its nose, that part that's resting isn't really getting Cydex on it. So there's a potential that that part isn't getting cleaned on the very tip. Probably is, but you never know. So you see this, they should have a funnel. In some way, that probe should be suspended in the Cydex or whatever disinfectant they're using. There's a couple of them out there. So this is an interesting thing for not using an approved cleaner. We get all kinds of things that happen in transducer. Matter of fact, this one, the next few slides, we'll see that. The thing about approved cleaners is manufacturers change approved cleaners. Guess what? They don't announce it. They don't tell you. No email. Is the decision, whether it's yours / the sonographer, and I try to put it on the sonographers a little bit. We're talking to them a lot about this. For most of the major manufacturers, Siemens, GE, Philips, they have really good web pages now for disinfecting and improving cleaners, that kind of thing. You can go there, you can put in your probe types, and then you can find what cleaners are approved for each probe. It's also very important you do each probe because sometimes a manufacturer will have for one particular probe, they will not approve all the same cleaners as they do for all the other probes. So it's always good to check. Matter of fact, this next example, by the way, those holes, that lens on that ultrasound transducer was like a sponge. That's what it did, it turned it into that. This one, see how it kind of looks like it's melted? It literally was. The lens melted. I did this. I didn't do it, I took this picture. I actually took this probe just to see what the heck it would do. It stuck it to my hand. It stayed there for like a minute. I mean, it was that sticky. It was, crazy thing is, it imaged perfectly. But I can't even imagine the amount of bacteria that was in this thing. And this was one where they were using the user manual, which was 5 years old, and using the approved disinfectant agent in the user manual that had probably been eliminated 4 years ago, but they never went online and looked. And she's like, well, Siemens never sent me an update. I'm like, they don't send updates. So it's one of those things. Use the online resources. Much more secure. And then you're doing the right thing. We're not exactly sure what happened to this probe. That's a GE probe. All we know is the lens started growing. We're pretty sure they were using the wrong disinfecting agent. But we don't really know. We got that picture and like, that's nasty. So. Obviously, cracked and broken. These are things that are physically happening. There's a reason for this, and a lot of times it takes a little bit of effort to kind of find out, maybe what happened, or is it, if you get one off, I mean, things happen, but if it's a consistent thing, transducers getting broken, there's got to be a handling issue, and it's finding out. Let's find the root cause of that handling issue. What is that that's causing this to occur? There are very few transducers that will develop stress fractures. It's pretty few. Generally, if you have a real crack, it's because something was dropped or in other ways damaged. But this kind of stuff, super easily repairable. So that kind of stuff can be just filled and sanded, and you're good to go if there's no other damage to the probe. This is a picture that somebody sent me of a TE probe heading off to surgery or doing a TE, and we're just looping the probe all over the machine, a $20,000 transducer. If this is going down the hallway and this cable catches on anything and rips that off the machine, that probe doesn't survive. They are not durable enough. And so that's why we don't, the only way a TE should move anywhere in a hospital is in a hard-sided plastic container. I was doing a TE talk one day, and we were talking about this, about when you move a probe, you move them in hard-sided containers. The manager of Central Sterile, I about died, raised his hand and said, so we would need a clean box and then a dirty box to come back to Central Sterile. Like, yeah, he goes, we have like 5 TE probes. I'm like, okay. He goes, so I'm gonna have to buy 10 boxes. And I said, yeah. He goes, that's a lot of money. I said, you go to Walmart and buy them like 15 bucks each. You don't even need a lid. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, it's $20,000. But I mean, so that was the interesting discussion, is that one department was concerned about the $100 they were going to spend on containers. And that was the holdup. So when you start to have these discussions, you find out. I'm like, could I just go buy them for you and bring them? Like, personally, I'll spend the $100. I don't make it expensive if you'll let me. And he, at that point, everybody started laughing. But it became very clear that it was kind of a nonsensical reason that they were damaging the probes. Because once it was damaged, the department had to come and say, we don't pay for that. That was the whole idea. So most of this stuff doesn't cost much to interact. That's the good news. This is exactly what happens when a TE gets caught in a door jam. Don't know why door jams are a thing with TE probes, but don't think think this is the only one. The same hospital did this to the exact same replacement probe 3 weeks later. On the same door. No idea how that happened, by the way, but they obviously weren't transporting it in a hard container. It was one of the, you know, after that, and they had spent $40,000. This was a few years ago, so it's probably more like $50,000 because that probe would have been much more expensive. Now they use hard-sided containers everywhere that goes, by the way. So yeah, this happens. And that's a total failure. That's not, you're not coming back. So there's a few kind of fails, and we see more than that every day in our probe lab. Both on the TE side and on just the general imaging, you know, regular probe side, you know, there's things that we see on a constant basis that are care related. And not everything is. Some things, you know, there are just failures or they're just accidents. And accidents can happen, but it's not an accident if it was preventable. So it's how do you take that knowledge now, use that trust relationship and the communication, and then you find a way to create a care plan that makes all of that go away. It takes a little bit of time, but with all that knowledge, it's very possible. So things to look for now, because part of taking care of the transducer is also finding the problems when they are small and getting them taken care of. We've said for years, repair quick and small. Don't wait for it to get worse. There are a few conditions where we would tell you, well, what's going on with that probe and where it's headed, it can't be fixed anyway, you might as well use it until it dies. If that is the true plan, just make sure that that's the plan. It's probably best to talk to somebody that would really know. Don't assume that you should wait on everything. Most things, we would tell you, as soon as you get a little crack, a little, even a nick in a lens, you're better to replace that as opposed to letting it get worse. So, transducers should be without any holes, cuts in the handle or lens material. Stranger leak at the nose and the connection should be solid and not pulling away or torn. Bad stranger leaks are a huge issue with probes dying. Once that stranger leak goes, we see people tape them, glue them, use them for another 4 or 5 days. If you use a probe with a bad stranger leak for 4 or 5 days, the probe's dead. Unless we can replace the array. It's going to pull the wires out of the array, and it's going to be gone. Inspect the lens for holes or delamination. Obviously, if there's dropout in the image, probe needs to be evaluated. Any crack or separation in the casing. And then the one thing we don't talk about much at all are the connectors, where they plug into the machine. I had somebody call me about a month and a half ago, and they said, hey, I've got a linear probe, and it's got some dropout in it. He brought it out to me, and we were going to give him a loaner. I grabbed the connector and looked at it. It was full of dust. I said, the probe's not bad, it just needs cleaning. It had been sitting on the shelf, and I hadn't grabbed that particular probe in a few weeks, and it had gotten dust in it. And so when they plugged it into the machine, the pins were just dirty. And sure enough, he went in, vacuumed it out, vacuumed the machine, plugged it, was fine. So just checking the pins every now and then. The other thing that we do see is because now, it used to be, technicians move probes around all the time. But now probes do so much, especially in cardiology, they only have one probe. That probe never moves. 6, 9, 12 months in the same spot. Believe it or not, that probe's going to oxidize a little bit. So every now and then, I tell my sonographers, just take them out, swap them to a new port, just move them. Might save some problems. So just a few examples of some holes. Not only are these holes, now the transducer is leaking more current than it's allowed to. Generally, if there's a hole in the lens, we're also leaking more current. So failing safety. You know, if we tell sonographers all the time, if your patient talks about the probe tickles or they feel like it's pulling hairs on their skin, they are probably getting shocked. That is something that happens. So every PM, transducer safety should be done now. All the manufacturers do it, and because we have to do the same PM as them, right? Now we have to do it too. So something should happen. Bad stranger leaks. I mentioned this earlier that some people tape things. Please don't. Don't use tape or any other glues, because the idea of doing that will probably keep them from being repairable. When you put electrical tape on a probe and around the sheeting, it actually alters the sheeting to where the industrial glues and things we're supposed to use don't work as well. So it's a lot of effort to get those sheetings cleaned back up. So we just advise people don't. You know, maybe if it's almost like a throwaway probe and there's something in the sheeting you want to, you know, you're going to end up having to replace it no matter what. That would be one thing. But generally, don't tape or glue anything if you want that probe to be repairable. A new issue. Generally, we love trophons. How many people have trophons in their facility, right? So we think trophons are really good. Like everything else, there are some unintended consequences. We're seeing some things. We're still learning. I'm actually going to trophon in 2 weeks, a week from Monday, to go visit their service depot, which is just about an hour and a half from me. My old college roommate is the vice president at Amazon, so I'm going to go see them, and we're going to talk about these unintended consequences. One of them is the clip that holds the transducer. There's 2 clips. There's a small and a big one. In ultrasound, generally we just want the bigger one. And also, if the trophon is mounted a little high, when the sonographers go to grab it, they're grabbing that cord and they're pulling down to pull it out, and that's causing problems. We really want that trophon like countertop high, not wall high. So that it's right there, right in front of us, so they can pull that straight out. So we're getting this break in the cable. I see it all the time, and I'm starting calling it trophon cable for a nice abbreviation. So this is an unintended consequence. You will see this with trophons over time. The picture doesn't show up on here very well, but this connector is full of gel. Had that been plugged into a machine, it would have ruined the machine, the probe, who knows what else. In the end, I cleaned that probe in about 40 minutes and it was perfectly fine. But it had gotten a bunch of gel on it because they didn't use it very often and it got splattered. So just how looking at something helps out. So this is kind of one of my best stories ever about how you don't keep using something when you first see the problem. I was sent this picture on Monday. And I'm like, hey, you need a loaner, it's got a little crack in the casing, we'll open that up, we'll make sure the probe's clean, we'll reglue it, we're good to go. I said the image was fine. Okay? So, that was Monday. They called me Friday, and they're like, hey, we're ready to send in the probe. I'm like, oh, I forgot totally about it, guys, because you never came back to me. You weren't sure. So by the time we got it into the probe lab, there was that much gel inside it. And then this is the other side. So that's what, with the copper shielding and everything, it doesn't take the gel very long to corrode things when it's housed in a tight space. So that's probably, by the time I got to the probe lab, that's probably 6 to 7 days after they first noticed the problem. But that's what 1 drop of gel over every patient for 5 days will do. Had they sent this in, it would have been super fixable probably, but that's a total loss. Because they waited. So TE probes, just a couple of quick things. A, transducers need to be inspected, TEs, before and after every patient. And by inspected, we don't mean like, okay, it's done. I mean, you really need to look at these things closely. Maybe not with a magnifying glass, but you really need to take your time. A good 2, 3, 5 minutes to check out the probe. They need to be leakage tested between each patient. And this is one probe that when you find anything wrong, you want that to go out the door that day. Because if water has gotten inside there, we need to get it into a probe lab and get it open and get that water drying out immediately. It only takes about 72 hours for water to actually develop corrosion. That's if it hasn't even hit the array. If it hit the array, the probe's done in all modern probes. but it really needs to happen pretty fast. So a few examples of what happens. So these are bending rubbers. In both these cases, this is the very end of the TDE that's very flexible, and it's a very fragile part of the TDE. It wears out, the side axis deteriorates it. These are both, have been around, these probes have been around for a long time, and they developed holes. This is horrific. That's a bending rubber. We're not sure why it turned into whatever this is. The white material that's on there is like, that's lint off of the towel. It's so rough. We're not sure what happened there, but that was weird. So we think maybe a wrong chemical or something. This is just overexposure to side X. Either those probes are being used a tremendous amount, or they're being left in side X too long. Doesn't make the probe bad. It does take life out of it. That's what bending rubbers should look like, nice and black. And unfortunately, the picture's not great there, but that's what they should look like. These probes have been bitten. Might have been a lack of a bite guard. Bite guards are really needed, but sometimes patients will spit them out kind of under, when they're half under, and they'll chew on the probe anyway. Your jaws are incredibly strong. You won't go through it, but that's the one on the right there. That would ruin that. That's too much. This one can be recovered from. So just to give you an idea, so this is a Philips X7-2T array. It's a very popular TE probe. And also it's a probe that with one drop of water in the array, it ruins it. And for years, we've been like, why is that? What's going on? And the reality is there's two things. A, there is no water protection in the tip of this probe. None was designed into it, but here's the reason. So if we look at the blow up over here, this is the array. And these are the wires coming from the array to go to the flex circuit. And every one of those individual wires is about the same diameter as a hair. And they are non-insulated. They are completely open. And they are suspended in the air. Breathing on them will apply enough pressure to smash them together. You can't even breathe on them. So this particular one has been out, and it's gotten mangled by people touching it and stuff. So it's a terrible, case of it in all these books. So all of them are smashed together and that kind of thing. But all it takes is one drop of water to drop on there, and we always say that the ASIC blows. We don't really think it is the ASIC. It's just the wiring, and there's no coming back from that. We can't fix that. What was that?
That's why it shouldn't touch it up.
No. Nope, not at all. So that's why any little bit of water kills. So this would be the same on the Philips X7 II, X8, probably the GE V6, whatever the rest of it is, can't think of it at the moment. But that's why. And it's pretty small. So I mean, this whole thing is smaller than a dime. So the care plan. You might think there's a big deal to create a care plan. The whole idea behind the care plan is that you have one and you discuss it. That's the key, is really just the idea of having a transducer care plan. Most of your sonographers don't have one. What they have is in their head, just, oh yeah, this is what we do. But we really want to have almost a formal plan. And a lot of it is just writing down the common sense things, because it just reminds them, this is the thing that we need to do. But if you don't have any trust in the department or any relationship, it will be hard to even have that discussion. But you could, and that could be the way you started. It's just like, hey, let's just sit down and figure out a care plan. And that might be how you go down the pathway. It should include things like inventory of transducers. Do you have an inventory of transducers you're not certain on? You should. Transducer theft is real. People come in and steal probes from hospitals. It happens. How to clean and disinfect your transducers correctly. General rules about storage and handling. Rules about transportation. Those kinds of things. You get into strict TEE care, that is a bigger discussion. You know, that might require actually some more conversation with folks like us, just to help you down that pathway. But a lot of it is just really coming up with the common sense ideas. When we do TEE care talks, when we're done with the talk, we actually go and we walk the transducer through the entire process. We want to see everything. Found out one day that somebody had actually mounted the holder on the wall that holds the transducer cable. They mounted it backwards. They couldn't figure out why the cable kept falling off the wall. It's because mounted it backwards. It's that simple.